everyone, and thanks very much for joining us. We're just here really to have a nice informal conversation about our new MA in Migration and Intercultural Studies, which is kicking off for entry in September 2021. I'm Katie, I work in the School of Languages and Literature, and as I said, we're joined by an array of people, so I'll let them introduce themselves. We're joined by Federico.
Yeah, I'm Federico Faloppa, Professor of Italian Studies and Linguistics in the Department of Languages and Cultures at the University of Reading. And I'm the Program Director of this new fascinating MA in Migration and Intercultural Studies. Thank you very much, Katie.
That's okay. And we're also joined by Charles and Sophie. So Charles, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, like Katie said, my name is Charles. I'm a second year law student going into third year with aspirations for becoming a barrister as well.
And Sophie?
So hi, I'm Sophie. I've just graduated from my BA in Spanish Studies and English Language, and I'm interested in going into journalism.
So we really wanted today to give you an insight of how broad and interconnected this MA is, and hopefully by showing an array of different students' perspective, we can give you that. But I'm going to stop talking so you can hear from the experts now and hand over to Federico.
Thank you very much, Katie, and thanks Charles and Sophie to join us today. We wanted to launch a new MA in Migration and Intercultural Studies in order to provide students with a firm understanding of social, cultural aspects and linguistic issues related to migration. And also we wanted to provide students with an opportunity to get committed with policies and also debates around migration, not just in the UK, around, across a worldwide kind of setting. And so we actually tried to design, we designed a new MA, which is really interdisciplinary, which is focusing on different aspects and is providing students with an understanding of, as I said, social, cultural aspects and issues, linguistic issues, political issues, but also, when we talk about communication and information and media and the media dimension around migration, that's another important point in our MA. And also to give students a wide range of topics and opportunities, a good range of expertise across, the School of Literature and Languages. So we have experts with international reputation working already on migration and languages, but also from other perspectives and points of view. We have a key and selling point in providing students with a language module. So if they want to study a new language, or if they want to consolidate their linguistic knowledge and competence, they can do that within the MA, because we believe that such an MA is going to be, important, is going to be crucial if you can communicate effectively and actively in an international context. And so the linguistics aspect is crucial. And also we want to provide students with professional networking and already opportunities to, with work placements and academic placements with international organizations. And that's another very interesting selling point of our new MA, because we're going to see that, while we're talking about this MA, but there are many MAs, on migration and intercultural communication and studies out there. But our MA is unique because we want to give our students the chance to get engaged and committed from the very beginning, and also to go on placement while they're doing the MA, not after the MA, but while they're doing it. So we want to provide them with this networking, the network they need in order to have placements in the UK and abroad with national and international organizations already working on migration. And I stop there because I want to hear from Sophie and Charles, their thoughts, their questions, their reflections about this MA.
Well, that sounds absolutely amazing, Federico. But when you, at the beginning of your introduction, you mentioned how sort of cross between sociocultural issues and linguistic sort of communications. I just wanted to ask, in the sort of context of recent press articles and really a press storm, if not a panic, over a migrant crisis and increasing migration levels with climate change and political upheavals in other countries around the world, how will the MA go into these sort of discussions about language informing thought, and the responsibilities we have to be careful with our language?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Charles, for this very important question. Yes, discourse around migration and migration phenomena is going to be crucial again. So when we talk about discourse, we talk about a whole of discourses that we have from the media sector, from political, arenas, from also the public opinion. So we want to understand how people talk about these issues, about migration, but we also want to understand how information and communication and the media sector can manipulate what you know about migration. And so we want to provide our students with that kind of critical knowledge and approach to migration and to communication and the media when we talk about migration. So absolutely, this is crucial, because we cannot talk about migration, without exploring these issues. We can't talk about migration without understanding text that talk about migration. And again, as I said, succeed in manipulating the public opinion around these issues. And we talk about text and media and representation. We talk about public opinion. And so if the public opinion is not well informed about these phenomena, complex phenomena, well, of course, the choices that also at public level and political level are made, can really dictate, the agenda and, for the next generation. So we want our students and ourselves as a community of learners and scholars around these topics be informed, be scholars, and investigate further discourse and the whole of discourses around migration. And this is, again, important when we talk about intercultural communication, but also multilingual aspects, because, of course, we don't want to just work on the English kind of language or the English kind of context, the British context. We want to have a firm understanding of international context, and so we want to have that kind of multilingual approach to migration, which means the more languages you can deal with, the more opportunities you will have to work with international organizations on these matters, but also the more opportunities you will have to understand people on the move who don't speak maybe English, who speak other languages, many other languages. They may be already multilingual from backgrounds, but maybe they don't speak English. So what shall we do? And that's why we want to add this linguistic item element in our MA. So our students will have to challenge themselves also on linguistic aspects and on linguistic competence, repertoires, and backgrounds. Otherwise, if we don't engage actively with people in different languages, we don't understand, we don't have a grasp of these complex phenomena. And second, we cannot challenge the common sense around migration, because we just, buy what the mainstream media want to sell out, which is actually one of the key issues. Let's try to be critical about discourses around migration. Otherwise, we cannot help anybody. And so this is why we have introduced these items in our MA design.
Absolutely. And I think that criticality that you were talking about is so important, and especially not just from a British perspective or an English perspective, because like you say, just looking at something in one language, it's not all about the words, it's about those meanings and those ideologies that are hidden behind those words. And when you actually look at things in different languages, you start to see things from a whole range of different perspectives and different beliefs that are expressed using language, but in a different way. So I think having that part of the course where you can actually pick up another language yourself, you develop these skills and you start to think about things in a different way, and definitely in a lot more open-minded way, which I think would be a really, really important way to approach this module, with an open mind, because of course a lot of the students that take it will probably end up changing their perspective on things that they've sort of been brainwashed by the media, I suppose, and what they consume all around them. But it's actually being able to question those beliefs and then maybe change them and look at them from a different perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sophie. This is again crucial, because let me say that language is everything, because communication is everything. Not just when we talk about migration or when we try to understand these complex phenomena, but we want to engage with other people and also at different levels, people coming from different countries, backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. Language means that, first of all, the more we can deal with that, with linguistic issues, the more knowledge we have in terms of languages and communication, the more we can communicate and also listen to other people, which is another crucial aspect. We don't want to impose our, views onto other people. We don't want to just say, this is the discourse on migration, and we want our students to just to get it, to buy it. No, just the opposite. Actually, we want to listen to other people. We want to listen to organizations and people working in international organizations. We want to be in the field, to work with people there, not just in our university, but also, let's say, in refugee settings across Europe, or in migration settings, or across migration trajectories. We want to see what happens really in Europe and beyond Europe, because we also talk about Latin American with our experts in Latin American studies. And so language means listening to other people, more chances, more opportunities, means communicating to other people. And from an intercultural perspective, language and culture and cultural aspects. Language means also reading text and understanding the complexity of text, and also the way in which text can manipulate the public opinion. So discourse analysis. Language means also teaching languages to other people. So language means delivering, language teaching in refugee settings, and that's another aspect. Tony Capstick has got an international reputation on these issues, and he's going to teach in this MA. And so he's worked with refugees in Syria, Lebanon, Afghanistan, and also with teachers in this country to provide them with the awareness and critical knowledge when they teach in these situations and contexts. So language means this, and languages mean actually the more chances to communicate, to get the information, the right information, and also to get the empathic kind of relation that you need when you want to work in this field, which is not just theoretical. It's just the opposite, actually. From the theory, we want to move to practice, and practice means understanding, and understanding means showing some kind of empathic, kind of approach to these issues, but also to the people that you're working with, not just working for, but working with. And the preposition is crucial again. So thank you very much for that, Sophie.
Yeah, I think that sort of conversation on empathy, it's really relevant to law, I found, particularly areas of law like criminal law, where we start looking at, particularly in like urban centres, and you start seeing rising levels of violent crime, knife attacks, organised crime, and particularly where they involve young black men. And especially in London, actually, you'll often see newspapers will discuss them in terms of gang or thugs, dehumanizing language, which is meant to rile people up. In the sort of 80s and 90s, and even now, really, there is always this sort of phenomena of a moral panic around different parts of crime. The same in the United States happened as well. And these conversations are then often linked to wider social contexts of migration, where you have, increased migration from, say, South Asia, accompanied by headlines in the Sun or the Daily Mail about Pakistani grooming gangs or something. So in law, we're constantly, or at least we're supposed to be constantly, trying to unpick these narratives and get to the fact, like, did someone actually do something wrong, or is there a wider context that's being missed there? And I mean, it's so important to really critically evaluate what we're saying, how we're saying it, what we're reading and listening to, and the questions we're asking of ourselves and of others, in order to avoid falling into those traps of a moral panic, of ethnic profiling, that sort of thing. And when we talk about cases, ongoing cases even, especially where they involve really contentious issues that people care a lot about, violent crime, sexual assault, anything really involving children or the vulnerable, they can be so those cases themselves can be so vulnerable to a sort of trial by press, where the headlines are going on and on and on about how terrible the defendant is, or how, you know, dastardly the prosecution is being by pursuing the case. And actually that can interfere, although we would hope it wouldn't, but it can interfere with the process, because at the end of the day, everyone sat in court at all times is a human being. Everyone is, you know, they're not sort of isolated under a rock for the duration of the case. So you can't alienate it from the context. So from a legal perspective, both academic and vocational, I mean, it just sounds fascinating and really important as well.
Thank you very much, Az. Actually, you give me the chance to emphasize a couple of key concepts again: interdisciplinarity and critical thinking. Interdisciplinarity means that we're going to provide our students with a diverse range of topics. I already mentioned language studies, but I can also mention applied linguistics and sociolinguistics, discourse analysis, politics and international relations, for instance, human rights and philosophy, international refugee law, as you said, and also, you know, law, you know, when we talk about migration in the UK and in Europe and beyond Europe. Then history of migration phenomena, that's another very important aspect, because if we don't understand, you know, diachronically, so the history of what happened, you know, what has happened, you know, we cannot really have a clear understanding of what's going on now, you know, why something is happening now in those places, in those areas, you know. So history, of course, is going to be crucial again. Literature in terms of representation, media studies, again, in terms of representation, this is all included in the MA offer, you know, in what we do and want to do with our students. But also, and so interdisciplinarity is a key again, selling point, you know, but also, as you said, critical thinking. So we want, for instance, lawyers or barristers, you know, anybody, you know, in that profession to have a sort of intercultural kind of understanding and knowledge when we talk about these complex phenomena. We want to have journalists to have a wider kind of perspective, you know, and an understanding when they talk about these complex phenomena. We want to have people working in humanitarian fields, you know, in the humanitarian fields, for NGOs, for instance, to have an idea of the complexity of languages and intercultural communication. We do have amazing people working in the field right now, everywhere in the world, but maybe mainly with the English language. Whereas one of the key issues is that, you know, you need to communicate with other people in other languages. You need to have also that understanding of their multilingual kinds of, you know, backgrounds. You need them to communicate, to facilitate the communication with you and with the organization you're working with. So this complexity needs to be untangled. And also we want to untangle, you know, another key thing that you said, Charles, and thank you very much for saying that. We want to actually challenge the categorization of people when we talk about people, overgeneralization when we talk about people. We are not talking about that group, you know, a specific kind of ethnic group that, you know, can be defined or categorized in some way when we talk about migration. This is ethnic profiling, which is actually, you know, is not based on anything but biased interpretation and representation of the reality. Whereas we want exactly challenge that, right? We want to challenge that biased representation and interpretation of the reality. So for us, you know, working with lawyers, journalists means and will mean also, you know, to challenge that over categorization, generalization, to say ethnic profiling in legislation, in the media, in communication, shouldn't be there, you know, shouldn't be actually something that we discuss about when we discuss about migration. But we want to see the complexity. We also want to see people, human beings, individuals, individual stories when we talk about migration, trajectories, motivations, cultural and linguistic backgrounds. This is what we want to talk about. And so if the media sector, but also professional sectors like, you know, lawyers, you said that, you know, are just, you know, looking at this phenomena as, you know, categories and something to apply to those categories. No, actually, these needs to be challenged and they must change, you know, to some extent. And that's why we created this new MA in Migration and Intercultural Studies, because exactly we want to do that. And also we want to provide our students with that critical thinking and ability to challenge, you know, given kinds of, you know, narratives of migration. Otherwise, you know, nothing is going to change. And change is another key and selling point, you know, for us. Thank you very much, Charles, for that comment.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can add as well, where you talked about this, the sort of misrepresentation that we see and finding like what actually the reality is. And I think it's really important because it's quite hard for us as sort of everyday people to actually find what the truth is. We only go by what we see on the media. So actually having experts as part of this module, as part of the teaching, who really dedicate their careers to research in trying to find out what the truth is to then teach it to the students that take this module, I think that's a really, really important and really valuable piece as well, because you know that the information that you're being given has been, has come from people who really dedicate their lives to researching this sort of thing.
Yeah,
this is actually. Oh, sorry, Charles, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Sorry. So I actually took a module this year in second year, Modern International Relations, which I absolutely loved. And it's all about politics, and it was quite different to law. But many of the underlying, especially in terms of like the real world, as opposed to theory, the real world applications, when we think about things like counterterrorism in a political context, there's real move away from just thinking about like, what are their strategic goals, how are they most likely to rationally try and achieve those goals. There's a real context of needing to understand the social basis of the people involved, of the individuals, like you said, Federico. When we think about rates of radicalization in Muslim communities, in urban centres in Europe, in the UK, in France, in Belgium. We have to look at the wider context. Are those people feeling, what drives them to radicalism? Do they feel othered from society? Do they feel like British citizens, or do they feel like Britain hates them because of what they see in the British tabloid press? The English language that they're exposed to when they come to the country, or French language if they go to France, etc., how that impacts them as well, and how they're taught to see themselves. I mean, my mother worked quite a lot with Bangladeshi women, actually, and she mentioned to me about her research there, how many women came from regions of Bangladesh, like the Sylhet, where they speak Sylheti, but when they come to this country, to the UK, they're given the choices of English, Bengali, or Urdu, and they don't speak any of these languages. So they get to the point where they come to England and they have to learn Urdu in order to then translate to their parents or grandparents into Sylheti, their actual language. So when we start trying to unpick these sort of very basic grid lines in which we try and force everyone into in order to kind of maintain some sort of semblance of social control, and when we start wanting to make actual differences to actual problems faced by actual people migrating in real world circumstances, then it's so important to, like Sophie said, have the experts there talking about their research, talking about the actual cases at hand. And I think it sounds really viable and practical, as well as interesting, to have this sort of way of doing things.
And I think as well, realizing your individual responsibility as well. I think a lot of people from the UK feel maybe detached from this topic and think, oh, well, how does this affect me? Because, I live here and I just go about my day. But actually having that understanding, like you say, you can then start to think about things differently and have that empathy towards people. And I think as well, a part of this module, this master's course, having the language learning aspect, not only, of course, does learning another language open many different doors and opportunities to you, but it can put yourself in that position of actually, not really understanding something and having to learn yourself. So you can put yourself in the situation that these people that go through the migration experiences and the refugees, you can sort of have that similar sort of understanding, obviously not completely the same, but you can actually put yourself in a position where, you're learning a completely new language and think, actually, you have a lot more respect, and, you realize how much time and effort and commitment that it takes for these people to actually try and fit into a society that's completely new to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if I can just build on that and also build it into a bit of a question for Federico, which I was just sort of come up with, but something we see a lot, I can only speak from experience of the English and Welsh law because that's the only sort of legal system I'm actually familiar with currently anyway. But when we come to areas like London, Birmingham, Manchester, a lot of what we see in terms of criminal law reform is a need for barristers and particularly prosecutors to really understand dialect. So even where, you know, they're speaking English, where we start looking at slang terms, or we start looking at different ways of phrasing things, we look at art and music and literature that young people are being exposed to. You get cases where, you know, a young man will text his friend or write notes onto his phone, quoting lyrics and then reworking them into like a rap song or something, and then that will be used as evidence to show an intent to harm someone. You know, and it's quite, when we look at law, what we're trying to do really is find the truth. You know, we're not trying to prosecute people who are innocent. We're not trying to find guilty people innocent and defend them. We're trying to basically create as robust a system as possible to get to the truth and to the facts, to accuracy. And, you know, like we've been discussing, that accuracy just can't happen without empathy. It can't happen with social context. So to put answer the question for Federico, with this MA, will it sort of look into those levels of language, not just in terms of, you know, like English, French, Spanish, but in terms of actual dialect changes within them and different regional slangs and that sort of thing?
Thank you very much, Sophie and Charles. You know, yeah, too many stimuli from you. I mean, too many ideas. So let me try to sum up a little bit. First of all, Charles, if I may, just going back to what Sophie said, this MA is based on research. And so we have people, colleagues, you know, working and researching on these issues for a long time. Myself, you know, I'm one of the experts at the Council of Europe to combat hate speech in Europe right now. So I'm working actively on counter narratives when we talk about also migration by minority groups and a European level. And Tony Capstick, I mentioned him already, working with the British Council and working with communities also locally. We have a network in Reading, the refugee support group, but also other support groups in the area. So I'm not just saying that, you know, our students are going to be pushed to move, you know, abroad, or to go abroad for their placement or for their experience. There's so much to do also, as Charles said, you know, in the UK when we talk about this, and also at the local level. And we have that already. We're applying for a very important award, which is the University of Century Award. So Reading is becoming a University of Century for students and refugees and scholars, you know, that want to come to the university as refugees and asylum seekers to keep studying and working in academia. So we have already that kind of networking and connections with the outside world. So it's not just theoretically or academic, you know. First, second, research. So we've been working with international organizations in several countries, as you know, the team teaching in this MA. And so we have real cases. It's not just theory, real cases in real context and settings, from a linguistic point of view, a socio-cultural point of view, a communicative point of view, but also from a, you know, as you said, Charles, you know, from the legislative point of view. So what happens there, you know, when we talk about rules, not just in the UK, but in Europe, you know, we have conflicting kind of, you know, laws when we talk about migration. Shall we understand that? Shall we try to understand what's going on there and try to also contribute to a wider discussion on that? So of course we can, and we want to. And then, Charles, when you said, you know, to what extent are we working on languages or linguistic varieties? That's a very interesting point, because gives me the chance to talk about the placement which are embedded already in the MA. So when we study in Reading, you know, when the students are with us in Reading, of course, we provide them with two key modules, two core modules, Introduction to Migration Studies, to give them a very, you know, wide overview of this of migration phenomena from a historical, cultural, sociological point of view, linguistic point of view. Then we have a core module which is Language and Migration, which is focusing more on the relation between language and linguistic issues and migration phenomena. And then we have a dissertation or a project in combination with a work placement in the field, with a lot of organizations we are already in touch with, in contact with, like Amnesty International, Save the Children, the British Council, several organizations in Germany, in Greece, in Spain, in Italy, in the UK, working for migrants and refugees, but also with migrants and refugees, together with them, together with their communities. And so this is how also we're going to ask our students to challenge themselves also from that perspective, right? It's not just the standard language, it's a variety of languages, it's a variety of, of ways of communicating, to people, with people. So understand, as you said, the dialect, what you call the dialect, what you mentioned that as a dialect, but also non-verbal communication is going to be another key issue when we talk about, intercultural communication. Non-verbal communication, something that people cannot verbalize and, cannot really articulate, but, how much information can we get, just from observing, from, looking at non-verbal, items, elements in communication. And so we need to be critical and constructive and proactive also in these aspects in the field, not just, in theory, in reading, not just in the classroom. Of course, the preparation is going to be in the classroom, but then in the field with real people, in real context, with real organizations, also to challenge them and their agendas and their way of working in the field. Because maybe there are amazing organizations, but, working from a monolingual point of view, i.e. English, French, lingua francas, to communicate in international contexts. Whereas, especially in refugee settings, we know that we need to be much more flexible in order to provide information, in order to understand information on people, but also in order to to deliver teaching and, other key items that can be really crucial for people on the move. For them, to facilitate, to enhance their chance to move from one place to the next and to get to their final destination if they have one, or just to facilitate their trajectory, the movement across different countries. And so that's what we want to try to do. It's very ambitious, but it's a challenge that you're ready to take, also because this is what is needed out there. And let me say that there are many, many ways of also getting jobs, to find jobs, because organizations like international organizations, but also working locally, nationally, they need people that are skillful, in terms of intercultural communication, linguistic kind of knowledge and awareness. Otherwise, how can they deal with this complexity? And complexity that is constantly and continuously changing, because it depends on what the people that are on the move, the countries of origins, the backgrounds. And so you need to be prepared, ready, and to be continuously, challenged, on these aspects, on these matters. And that's why, we want to provide our students with this kind of diversity, the range of opportunities and also skills that we want to transfer onto them. Mm-hmm. In Reading, in the classroom, with this pool of experts, but also in the field, with these organizations in the UK and abroad, up to, even to South America, because Shirley Nestor, my colleague in Latin American studies, she's working with Colombian, communities, and also with the Colombian diaspora in Europe. Just to mention, just to give you another example of what we can do and want to do with our students. Thank you very much for asking me that question.
Well, I think we're going to have to call it a day there, but thank you very much. If that hasn't convinced you, I don't know what will. Do check out information on our website about the new MA and join us if we have more conversations like this, where you can ask Federico questions or find out more information that you want to. But from us today, that's goodbye and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks, Charles and Sophie, and thank everyone.